It's time for Physician Family Finances, the show where physician moms and dads like you can get the answers and encouragement you need to turn a good earned income into great life outcomes for tomorrow and today.
Hello, physician moms and dads. I'm Nate Reineke, certified financial planner and primary advisor.
And I'm Ben Utley, the service team leader here at Physician Family. Nate, I have a little story for us today.
Tell me.
So we've been experiencing quite a bit of new things going on out there, and I've been answering questions some of which I've never answered before, which is rare for a guy who's been at this for 3 decades. But we got some totally new stuff going on,
Mhm.
and I've found that it's been helpful to begin answering those questions by defining terms. So I have heard that I've heard clients use a word which means something to me and it means something to them, but it's not necessarily the same thing. I want to tell you a little story. So I'm going to flip this and I'm going to say it's going to be doctor patient. You know, what patients hear, what doctors say are not necessarily the same meaning. So this is years ago, right? One day my wife comes home and she's just in tears. And I'm like, what's going on? She said, I just got back from the doctor's office. And I said, really? Like, what happened? She said, he said, I have influenza.
Mhm.
And she thought she was going to die. And I
Mhm.
said, sweetie, that's just what they call the common cold or flu. She's like, really? I said, yeah, no big deal. And I've had some aha moments like that with physicians that I talk with about kind of financial terms. So I think it's important for you and me to remember that what the audience hears is not always exactly what we intend for them to hear.
Mhm.
And physicians are very intelligent people, right? But there's a little experience that goes into this too. And sometimes I worry that we're teaching the graduate level course here or the 400 level course, and sometimes our students have not had the 100 or 200 level intro to financial terms thing. So I
Mhm.
think it's just important to keep that in mind. By the same token, folks, if you have a question that is even a basic one, where you're just like, what is this? Or how does this work for me? It doesn't have to be advanced. It can be anything. Podcast.physicianfamily.com. That's like your free advice line into the podcast.
Yeah.
So,
I can think of a couple words that I not only have had to define recently, but had to explain that there's a spectrum of meaning, or a
yes,
spectrum, I guess, of the way people take it.
nuance.
So yeah, nuance.
Nuance. It's not
So
just E. coli, it's E. coli with the subvariant.
yeah. Okay, let's get to the questions then. So, first question's from an emergency medicine doc in Massachusetts. Just wanted to hear if you have any thoughts right now, given the market downturn and investment strategies in light of tariffs, and what could turn into a trade war. I know we have a long time until our retirement goals, so doing anything drastic now I know is not recommended, but it's hard to see $60,000 in retirement investments gone in a few weeks and anticipate that will go down further in the coming weeks and months. So
Mm.
there wasn't exactly a question there, but there's some implied questions. What do you
I
think?
wanted to know if we have any thoughts. Answer is
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, we have thoughts.
Okay.
What do you think?
Uh, well, what do I think? The thoughts I have are this time feels different. This time is probably not different because there have been a number of times when I felt like this time was different, but it wasn't actually different.
Hmm.
In my distant past, there have been some times where I responded as if this time was different. And then when I look back at my journal where I keep these moves, I'm like, no, why did I do
Yeah.
that? Right? And I've had a couple clients who didn't believe me when I said, this time's not different. And they got out only to get back in when things had gone up and they locked in their losses. So uh, here's what I would say about this kind of thing. There may come a time when it is actually different. And at that time, the world may end. Maybe the best bet is what I call the gold and guns portfolio, which is gold under your bed and guns under your pillow, right? Gold and
Hmm.
guns. But until that time happens, every time you think it's different, guess what? It's not. And that one
Hmm.
time when it's different, farting around with your portfolio is not going to change anything because it's
That's
not
right.
gold
Yeah.
and it's not guns, right?
Hmm.
So I'm just going to go out there on a limb and say this time's not different. So don't screw up a 30-year future for the sake of the whims of a madman.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and it's so not different that I can say we anticipated this. In fact, if you were a client of ours for the last 6 years, we've been saying, hey, the market's, pretty expensive. Don't know when it's going to go up or down, but just be aware we could go through a downturn,
Yes. For
right?
those of you that are listeners who've never been through our portfolio onboarding process, we have this neat little email called the investment policy statement.
Hmm.
And it's written because nobody's ever written their own investment policy statement, right? But it basically says, I am a moderate investor or I'm an aggressive investor and I want to invest 90% of my stuff in stocks and 10% in bonds, or I'm a conservative guy who's got $20 million dollars. I want to invest, mostly in bonds and a little bit of stocks, right? And I'm willing to tolerate volatility that could reduce the value of my account by 50%, 30%, 20% over any given 1 year time period. I'm willing to endure that volatility. I have that risk tolerance. Now, it's not an agreement, it's not a contract, it's not a hedge clause. It is simply a meeting of the minds. And I've been doing this since I became an investment advisor on my own. Like 28, 29 years, I've been using that same similar statement because we know the market's going to go down. We know that. And we basically promise that at some point you're going to lose money. That's just how
Hmm.
markets go. I would say that expecting the market to stay up and go up and lock up is equivalent of becoming a new parent and expecting to have a baby that never has a poopy diaper.
Hmm.
Because guess what? Babies poop and markets take dumps too, right? And you don't throw away your kid just because they took a crap.
Yeah.
We're not going to throw away our investments or do something drastic just because the market's in the dumps, right?
Hmm.
So, hang on. This is a lifer, right? When you make a baby, you're on a ride, right?
Yeah.
And when you're a serious investor, you're tucked in for the long haul. And
Hmm.
I got to tell you, whoever is the source of this stuff, they probably won't be alive by the time you're spending your retirement. And if you're about to retire and you're our client, you probably have a big slug of bonds, or you damn well should have.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. It's something that for this particular person had to happen. If the
Yep.
market kept going up like it has been for the last 3 years, which is, you know, this is far from trying to rub it in someone's face, I guess. But
Hmm.
the person that hasn't been investing for the last 5 years, they have had incredible returns, so incredible that I would say, uh, kind of scary levels of returns. Like they're
Hmm.
so good that you cannot expect that to keep happening because at the root of all this is real businesses that have to make enough money to make you money on your money.
That's right.
And if the value of these companies keeps going up at an unsustainable level, then your investments will have to stop growing before retirement. So
Yes,
this is not a, you know,
so I just got off the phone with a guy who was reading the Vanguard market forecast out like 5 or 10 years. And I think the reason Vanguard puts that forecast out is so they can know how wrong they were when they look back. Because these forecasts are never right. I don't think Vanguard's forecasts have been right. I read a little blog who occasionally brings up the Vanguard forecast and looks back and like they weren't right. I don't know why people forecast returns, but here's the thing to know, right? If you buy expensive stocks, you should expect a low or negative return. If you buy really cheap stocks, you should expect a a return or something positive. The cheaper you buy your stocks, the better your returns are going to be over the long haul, period. And that
mhm,
applies to valuation. It's not prices, it's valuation. Okay,
yeah,
so um, yeah, and I would say just keep going, keep doing
just
your
keep
thing.
going.
Yeah.
Okay, cardiologist in Oregon. I work for a nonprofit that is being acquired. What should I do with my non-governmental 457B, which needs to be distributed over the next 12 months with at least 50% distributed 2025, and the remainder in 2026.
Nate, I want to get on my non-governmental 457B soapbox, but the audience has heard my voice for the last 7 minutes. So will you please get on the soapbox and jump up and down
Yes.
about 457Bs?
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting when I talk to people about their 457Bs, and especially people who have been funding them for a long time, and they say, hey, you should probably stop contributing to this. They look at me with crazy eyes. And I remind them that I understand that. And by the way, if you tell your friends at work that you're going to stop contributing to these, they're going to look at you with crazy eyes.
Hmm.
So we're aware of this. Here's the problem. These accounts come with what's known as a substantial risk of forfeiture. Substantial risk of forfeiture.
Yeah.
And what that is essentially it means that if your if your hospital or your work, if they go bankrupt, you lose this money.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Doesn't matter
All
how it's
done.
invested. It could all be in cash. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
because the
Yeah.
creditors get it. All right.
Yes.
Now, I know you're sitting there at work, you're earning a nice living, and everything seems great.
Paying
So
big
you're
taxes.
paying into
Yep.
all that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so you want to avoid paying all these taxes right now. So you'd like to put money in a 457, and it
Tempting.
seems like everything's in good shape, like financially healthy hospital, right? Ben, you have seen hospitals go from uh, riches to rags really fast,
Yes, I have.
and but the people I'm talking to, they generally don't believe that's going to happen to them.
Oh, no.
Okay, so let's just set aside this substantial risk of forfeiture. Keep saying substantial because everyone.
Substantial.
This is what I'm
This
not
is the new
calling it that.
drinking game. It won't be
Yes,
kombucha for plan anymore. It'd be kombucha for financial.
substantial.
No,
Okay.
substantial.
Yes. So let's set that aside for a moment. If you have a non-governmental 457B, the real thing that's probably going to happen to you, in fact, I've only seen it done successfully one time because the person retired the year after they contributed to it. But if you
Okay.
have a long time left in your career, the chances that you either leave this job, your company gets bought out, which is in this question, or really probably the leaving the job part. I mean, you're going to leave this job at some point in the next 30 years. What happens is they have to give you this money right now. They
Yep.
just have to pay you out. And you might be asking the question, can't I just roll it over? Probably not, because you'd have to find a job that not only has a non-governmental 457B, but also accepts rollovers, and that generally doesn't happen.
That's like rare and rare.
Yeah. So the reality is all the taxes that you saved now get lumped into usually 1 year.
So you're making all these nice little contributions at the top of your marginal tax bracket.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you get all those contributions back in one lump sum at the top of your marginal tax bracket. And if you're in the 24% marginal tax bracket where you're making your contributions, you might get that back in the 30s. You might get that back in the 37% stinking tax bracket.
Yeah.
This
And
is
so
like it's like the anti-defined benefit plan. It's like the opposite of how those things work. What I find amazing, Nate, it's like you've been an advisor for uh coming up like 8, 10 years now.
Mhm.
You've been with us for what, 8 years, right?
Yeah.
So I've been at this for over 20 years, 30 plus years. And in my career, I've never seen this work out a single time.
No.
Not once, not once. And I've always seen this tax time bomb explode every time. And I've seen CEOs of not-for-profits and for-profits that had these, well, actually not-for-profits, who had the 457 plan and it
Mhm.
didn't work out. They're like, oh, the company's solid, it's fine, everything's good. And then they're taken over, it all gets distributed.
Yep. And so the question is, why would you? It's not how can I avoid the risk while still getting my tax breaks? It's like you're not going to get the tax break. Why would you? Why
Because
would you do this?
you're a bad doctor friend, because friends don't let friends invest in 457 non-governmental plans.
Yes. Yeah, this is non-governmental, and so you generally, not generally, I've never seen a case where it worked. It was going to work out, except for one, and it was the most unique thing I've ever seen. Doctor was about to retire, got bought out, had to change jobs, was going to work there for 1 year. I said, well, probably not a whole lot of risk this place goes under in 1 year. And if it does, you lost 23,000 bucks.
So in our combined 40 years of doing this, we've
Yeah,
seen it happen
once.
once. Okay,
And it
so here's
probably
the thing.
saved a grand total of
So
$3,000 in taxes.
so this question, basically what I heard is they're going to distribute half this year and half next year. I have to
Mm-hmm.
say, of the distribution things, this is the most humane I have ever seen, because with these things, you want to spread it out over time if your pay is going to be the same, or you want to lump it up in a year when you have low pay. For example, if you were about to retire and they did this to you, it'd be better to push it off into your retirement year so you're in a lower bracket. But it sounds like the powers that be in this case did a lot of careful thinking about this and decided to split it over 2 years so it's less likely to put them in the top marginal brackets. This is a recognition of the powers that be that it's a raw deal. It's a
Mm-hmm.
raw deal. So no tax break and substantial risk of forfeiture. Why bother? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess they hope you stay for 30 years and they stay for 30 years, but
That
that's
collapsing sound you hear, that's the sound of our soapbox going down.
yeah. All right, next question from a cardiologist in Colorado.
You know what I love about Colorado?
What's that?
It's where John Denver's from.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to
All
save
right.
you from my John Denver imitations and songs, but yeah, I heard it was a
Thank you.
rough year for skiing there this year. I heard they didn't get as much snow.
I don't keep up with skiing. I got hurt
No,
one time snowboarding, and now I try to stay away from the mountains.
I got a kid in Montana. I hear about skiing all the time.
All right. My wife and I are starting to look in our neighborhood for a new home. This process could take a while, so we're not putting our home on the market until we have found a new place. I was hoping to review options for financing the new home. My bank told me today that they would need 15% down. We have some cash saved. I'm guessing this won't quite get us there, but we will be close. Should we get a line of credit against the equity to make up the difference?
Why don't you take this one? You're a housing guru.
Yeah. Um, tiny, tiny little soapbox, Ben. So
Hmm.
tiny you can barely see it. But I keep seeing this over and over and over where everybody wants to buy before they sell.
Mm.
And I think that everyone has some PTSD from the COVID market.
Yeah.
It is okay to buy a house contingent on the sale of your house.
Yep.
That is fine. And if for whatever reason, if that makes this deal fall through, I think the wise decision is just to move a little slower. There's going to be a new house for sale down the street tomorrow. I know it's not actually tomorrow, but in the grand scheme of things, it's basically tomorrow. Just
So
take this slower. It's fine.
what I found triggering about this question was some banker has told a physician they had to have 15% down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in what world does a physician have to have 15%? Like I've seen 0, I've seen 5, I've seen 10. 15? Like really? Such that they're going to have to get a home equity line of credit. And by the way, kids, if you're planning to bridge your loan like this, and you have an old home with a bunch of equity in it, you're thinking about getting a home equity line of credit on that house and selling it, guess what? You better secure that home equity line of credit before your old house goes on the market, because once your house is on the market, banks are not going to touch that home equity line of credit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is a do before you list kind of thing if you're going to do that. But I think before you looked at the HELOC, I would kind of look under the couch cushions, in which case you might actually look in your taxable portfolio. So if you
Mm-hmm.
recently invested in your taxable portfolio, you might have some losses in there, and you could harvest some of those losses to offset some of your taxes and future gains and use that to purchase your home. Because the alternative is, mortgage rates that are 7%. I'm sorry, but it might be difficult to beat 7% in the coming year or two. So that's another consideration I'd make.
Yeah, I agree. Um, in certain moments like this, when there is money to be saved, you kind of have to all hands on deck, try to find as much as you can, do the best that you can without completely screwing up your plan. But you're going to get a bunch of cash here in a minute when you sell your house. So you
Yes.
replace all that. But the HELOC is, now that I'm off my soapbox, the HELOC is not a bad idea. In fact, it's a pretty good idea. And
Hmm.
as long as you don't go crazy and go find someone that's willing to sell you, give you 100% of the value of your home. Most of them are 80%. 80% loan to value. So define that for a moment, Ben. Remembering, let's
Yeah,
define that.
so I want to stop here for a second. It's not just loan to value, it's combined loan to value. So
Hmm.
you have a $100,000 home, like such thing exists, right? A
Hmm.
$100,000 home, and you have a $40,000 mortgage on it. You have $60,000 in equity. So your loan to value ratio right now is 40,000. That's the loan value, 100,000. So that's 40% loan to value, or LTV in mortgage speak. Now, let's say that you can pick up another $20,000 home equity line of credit. So your total indebtedness is now $60,000. That's your combined loan. So you get your combined loan to value ratio, which is 60%. Typically, with home equity lines of credit, I have not seen one go up to 100% since before COVID, but it's fairly common to see the combined loan to value ratio with seconds, like a home equity line of credit, be 80%.
Hmm.
So you can figure out what your debt is. Uh, well, actually, figure out the value of your home, multiply that by 80%, subtract out the debt that you have, and that's the amount that you might be able to get on a home equity line of credit.
Yeah. Couple
Boom,
pitfall
defined.
here. Yeah, we're in Colorado here, Ben. So these are I think we're in Colorado Springs too.
Don't
Um,
try this in New York, kids.
yeah, yeah. So these home equity lines of credits, um, they usually have a limit to how much you. So let's say you don't have a mortgage. You got $1 million house. You're like, I'm going to go get an $800,000 HELOC. Usually there's a
Nope.
limit of 2 or 300,000.
Yeah,
So you got a little wiggle room here, but at the end of the day, it would be okay to wait 6 months and save up.
yeah,
Like the home buying makes everyone crazy. It made me crazy too when I'm buying and selling houses. I know the feeling.
yeah,
Just take it a little bit slower. Get that 5% down. It's no big deal. So it depends on your situation. If you're a new doc and it's going to take you 5 years to get 20% down, I can see that. But and family in Colorado that almost has the cash to put 20% down to keep their home, I think they can probably build up a little more cash.
yeah. Just wait a little while.
Yeah.
It's a recession. Hey, houses might go on sale. You know,
Yeah, it's true too.
good time to buy a used car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Primary care doc in California. What is tax loss harvesting and is it dangerous or extreme?
this is a good question. This is a real question, and this is like the influenza question. I led the top of the show about the influenza thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I took this call literally this morning about 6:30 our time, and the person was very concerned that we had tax loss harvesting available, in fact, turned on in an account that we managed for them. And I'm not sure what they thought tax loss harvesting was, but I led the conversation by saying there is no downside to tax loss harvesting. It is only upside. And they're like, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah, here's how it works. Imagine that you buy a security. Let's say you bought a stock mutual fund. Let's say that you bought the maybe we hear about the S&P 500 a lot. Maybe you bought the S&P 500 index, okay? And let's say you bought $100,000 worth of that, and now it's worth $90,000. So we had a 10% drop from the top, right? So you have a $10,000 loss. You can sell that and harvest that capital loss, and you can use it to offset future gains, or you can use it to offset up to $3,000 worth of ordinary earned income, in which case you will probably save a whopping $1,000 in permanent tax breaks, right? So it's not
Mm-hmm.
super valuable, not worth hiring a financial advisor for. But if you do have a financial advisor, you want to make sure they're doing this. 100,000 goes to 90,000. We sell it. Now we're out of the market. Okay. So what are we going to do? Are we going to buy it back? No, we can't buy it back because of this thing known as the wash sale rules. And it says that you have a 61-day window during which you cannot buy back the same security. You can't buy it back before you sold it. You can't buy it back after you sold it. It would disallow your loss. So rather than sit out of the market for 30 days, which could be disastrous, what you
Mm-hmm.
do is you turn around and buy a similar but not materially identical security. So, for example, you might sell your S&P 500 fund, and you could turn around and buy the Russell 1000 fund, which is large caps. You could turn around and buy a total market index, right, which is all the U.S. index. You could turn around and buy international if you wanted to. It's not close to the same, not the same risk exposure. But yeah, if you got out of the S&P 500 and you got into a broader market index, then you get to have your disallowed loss. And with any luck, it would ride back up to 100 and beyond that. And then when you sell that security in the future, you would have a gain based on that $90,000 price point. So that
Yeah,
is, yeah, that's how tax loss harvesting, the generalities of it. So what
yeah,
did I
that's right.
miss in this? What else is extenuating that I would need to know as a tax loss harvesting guru?
Well, tax loss harvesting is interesting. It seems like, I would say that most of the time it seems the exact opposite of dangerous or extreme. It seems like a no-brainer,
Hmm.
right? Um, but I wouldn't say that uh, it kind of is a no-brainer, Ben, but there is some nuance to this, right? You just pointed something out there. You'll have a lower basis, okay? So
Yep.
you'll have a lower basis, which that means that when you go to sell, you'll pay more in taxes. If you
Hmm.
save some taxes, you'll pay some taxes later. Um, that is the other piece of this is, let's say you weren't in the S&P 500 and you were in exactly the fund you wanted to be in.
Mm,
You're selling your favorite fund to buy into some other fund, and hopefully that fund goes up in value, so you're kind of stuck with it forever.
yeah.
I don't think that those are good enough reasons to not do tax loss harvesting. Like, I wouldn't avoid tax loss harvesting because it's your favorite fund. There's a lot of really good funds out there,
Hmm.
but it's not always a perfect thing, and you probably don't need to kill yourself over doing it if you're doing this on your own. There's some people I've met that they don't do it at all. They just keep their favorite fund.
Here's what I'll say is the potentially dangerous part. It doesn't really have anything to do with tax loss harvesting unto itself.
Yeah.
When you're tax loss harvesting, you're in there trading, right?
Yes.
And while you're in there, maybe we'll just load up on this. Maybe we'll tweak that. So
Hmm.
it's the gateway to some possible bad decisions. If you have tax loss harvesting and it's automatic, or if you have a financial advisor who's doing it, I think that's good. If you're doing it yourself, though, you really need to do it sober and perhaps with a chaperone,
Yeah.
so you don't wander off in the weeds, right?
Yeah. Easy to do. That is easy to do.
And
I just
speaking of
spoke with,
wandering off in
yeah.
the weeds,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm segueing to take us out, Nate. Is that
Let's do
okay?
it. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of wandering off in the weeds, if you tend to wander off in the weeds, or perhaps you never get off in the weeds, like so much is going on in your life that you just haven't had a chance to get to it, or if you have buddies and friends that are in that boat, maybe they could use a little advice. So what I'd ask you to do is just find out if we're a match, or send them to our website. Go to physicianfamily.com, click on Get Started, take a little quiz there to see if we're a match. We can talk, and if that works out, we can fall in love. And if not, if you're not ready for that, ask us a little question. Just tiptoe into your inbox, put in podcast@physicianfamily.com, type in whatever question you got, as crazy as it may seem, and hit send. And we'll answer your question and we may feature it on the air. So until next time, remember, you're not just making a living, you are making a life.
Are you ready to turn worries about taxes and investing into all the money you need for college and retirement? It's time to make a plan and get on track. To find out if we're a match, visit physicianfamily.com and click Get Started. Or you can ask a question of your own by emailing podcast@physicianfamily.com. See marketing disclosures at physicianfamily.com/disclosures.